So, coming from the perspective of someone who is not a commoner, who does not have sheep, who is not a farmer, though I used to do quite a lot of farm work in my youth, but who has got an ecological background, like Julian, my degree, well, I think your degree was in zoology at Oxford, but from a very young age I was mad keen about natural history. When I come to an area like the Lake District, or indeed any part of the uplands of Britain, what I see is an ecological disaster area. To me it looks like the aftermath of a nuclear winter. These bare hills are extraordinarily barren. You spend a couple of hours sitting in your average suburban garden anywhere in Britain, and you will see more birds of a greater variety of species than you will in a 5-mile walk in almost any upland area. And yet somehow, because this is what we are used to, this is what we consider as the natural, ordinary state of the hills. And that's a reflection on what the fisheries biologist Daniel Pauly calls shifting baseline syndrome. With every generation that passes, you conceive as normal what prevailed in your youth. And you might see some decline within your own lifetime, but you are unaware of the declines which took place in previous lifetimes. Would the floods in Cockermouth and Whitehaven have occurred if there were forests in the Lake District on the fells? If the rivers were rewilded so that decanalised, allowed to meander and the rest of it? Probably not. When you look at the different responses, for instance, of the River Leaser in Ennerdale and the St John's Beck in Thirlmere, and the way they responded completely differently to that 10 inches of rain you got in one night in 2009, you'll see that almost certainly those floods would not have occurred. There would not have been a loss of life. There would not have been the wrecking of so many homes and shops and the rest of it in those towns. And it seems to me quite wrong, when we're paying for farming in this country, paying £3.6 billion a year, that we should not be paying for social goods rather than for social harms. And one of those social goods is trees in the uplands, and a social harm is no trees in the uplands because of all the downstream impacts that those have. Basically nowhere in Britain, or almost nowhere, where you can escape from the universal impacts of humanity, and particularly in the uplands of sheep, which are, I believe, peculiarly damaging. And I see, I walk over parts of the Lake District where the grass is this high, where there's bare rock, where there would not have been bare rock at all before. The long-term soil erosion caused by grazing over many, many centuries. I'm not blaming it all on current practices at all. Current practices have got something to answer for. And I look at this former rainforest land and think this is amazingly, staggeringly impoverished. This is why I say that I see the Lake District as one of the bleakest parts of Britain, comparable in terms of its wildlife and its diversity to the chemical deserts of East India. Not a message which I know is popular in this part of the world. Of course it's not.
You're attacking somewhere that is already nature rich. And I know if you look at like a wooded area and you go through it and you're going to look at, like what you say, diverse habitats and what have you, yes, that's completely different, but there is that already in the Lake District. There are areas that aren't grazed by livestock, and you attacking like with the flooding side of things. When I was a kid, the water board used to come and clear all the rivers up Langdale, and they don't bother. The money just seems to have dried up and it seems to have been left, and if you were to say to someone to dredge it or anything, they would worry about the crayfish or the trout. But if it isn't dredged and it washes away a beck edge, what happens to the trout and the crayfish then? Do you know what I mean? You're looking at it in an idyllic way, and a lot of what you're saying, like carbon storage, has already been done in schemes already at the minute, with different graziers, and it is quite insulting to hear, that you can blame it on sheep, when I think it's one of the most diverse habitats. Whether you agree or not, I think it's just to get a reaction and sell a book.
you're talking, Will, about you know, the need to dredge the rivers and stuff. I mean, all the experience of the last few years has shown that the dredging is what causes floods. That you're speeding the water
Why
down
are they doing it in
to
Somerset
the
now?
nearest towns. Well, there's
Why is
been
the
a
government
huge-
jumping to it and spending millions of
because
pounds?
they're
to get it done?
overriding the advice of almost all the experts. Because there's
Well,
a
it's
very-
expert advice.
No, well, it's not actually. The experts are saying don't dredge, except in a couple of very specific pinch points. But
Do you
what
not-
the government is...
Do you not think it's the rain, not the sheep?
Well, obviously the rain, you know, there's been a lot of rain this winter. But what we've seen is water coming down the rivers much faster than it would have done if there were good flood attenuation in the catchments. And so given that we're entering...
But there's been less dredging.
Just let me finish, please. Given that we're entering an era of climate change where we're going to see more extreme weather, you know, and we're likely to see heavier rain every winter of the kind that we've seen...
Every time I watch the weather
Can you just let me
forecast,
finish this?
I'll finish this one now. Every time I watch the weather forecast, we get the coldest winter ever,
I'll give you
the
a
heaviest snowstorm, or the wettest of this. How long has these records been held? You know, the Thames has frozen in the past, and one thing or another. I don't understand. We've had ice ages, but it's always the coldest or the wettest or whatever. It's all just to sell news.
Okay,
Right,
look,
come here.
Yeah.
Give George's.
I came here because I thought it was the right thing to do. I was invited to come here and to talk to the commoners because you know, Viv and other commoners thought it was a good thing to get me here, and I wanted to meet people and hear the point of view. I did not come here to be told that I'm saying all this to get a reaction and to try to sell my book, and I did not come here to be cut off when I'm trying to make the points that I'm trying to make. So please show me some respect. I hope I'm showing you and the rest of you some respect. I would like a little bit of it back if you don't mind. And just to try to finish this point, that if we're going to get wetter winters, we're going to need to work a lot harder to make sure that those do not lead to more and more damaging floods. And one of the means we have to do that is looking at how the land is managed and how the water can be slowed down and held back for as long as possible so it can drain out slowly rather than rushing all down at once.
Moving, as Judy's quite rightly said just there, we are moving towards a more integrated land management system that does have some planting in the uplands, and it'd be interesting to see if that does actually reduce water flow. But again, we're going to wait for 30 or 40 years to get there, don't we?